You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dmitri Vietze. I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors. We are a music and tech PR firm, and super excited for our guest today. Any of our regular listeners or our conference attendees know that we walk a fine line on our definition of music tech. As the tools of music production get into more and more hands, we continue to explore the seismic shifts that are throwing together the companies that record musicians and the ones that make the instruments and software that musicians use to make music. We're all watching as people like Media Research's Mark Mulligan point out that tech companies and record labels are embracing the top of funnel music creator tools, and it's changing the centrifugal forces beneath the music industry. Today, we bring in two leaders from a company that has been pivotal in music making tools for 25 years, Native Instruments. The Berlin-based outfit started by making waves with a virtual modular synthesizer, which took advantage of the screen-based interface and growing processing power of personal computers. That approach led to more and more customizable virtual synths, samplers, and effects with names you've probably heard, like Generator, Reactor, and now a comprehensive suite called Complete with a K. Along the way, they went in and did the same thing for the DJ world with a line called Tractor, also spelled with a K, opening up a whole world to DJing without physical product. And why stop there? They're also known for their guitar rig effects and amp simulator. Finally, they also produce some hardware controllers like Tractor Control for DJs and Machine, the colorful, I call it fat button groove box sampler drum machine synth thing, and now the Machine Plus, which works without a computer. I'm very excited to have with me today Native Instruments CEO Constantin Koehncke and President and Chief Product Officer Robert Linke. Welcome.
Welcome, Dmitri. Great to be on the show.
Hey, Dmitri. Good to be here.
Awesome to have you. So let's jump right in. And since we've never had anyone from Native Instruments on the podcast before, what are some of your favorite stories from the early days of Native Instruments?
Wow, that's a big question. I think the company is made up of quite a rich tapestry of many stories over its now 25-year history. We actually just, I think 3 weeks ago, officially had the 25th birthday of Native Instruments, but we are holding back a bit on celebrating. We need actually a bit more time to prepare for the celebration, which is coming later this year. I think personal stories are always the ones that connect the most. And I think many people came to Native Instruments because of their passion for music production, for music culture, for DJing. And my personal story is no different. I was a DJ in Berlin's electronic music scene for quite some time in the mid 2000s. And that's ultimately led me to Native Instruments because I was using Tractor at the time and came to the company as a DJ, as a power user, if you will. And that's, I think, the story of many people at Native. I think what really kept me inspired over the years was the ability and opportunity to meet with many of my musical heroes. I lived in the US in LA for 7 years for Native Instruments, so I was able to connect with many of my favorite artists from my passionate time as a hip-hop aficionado when I was younger. And I think those were some of the moments that really show you why you are so passionate about what you're doing, and that really drives us here at Native. I think Robert, what
I was going to say now, before we jump to Robert, now I want to hear what hip hop artists were inspiring you at the time, because I grew up in the 80s in New York and had a similar theme.
I think one a pretty pivotal moment for me was we did a product with Havoc from Mobb Deep. We did a Machine expansion with him, I think in 2015, I want to say. And he used to come to the LA office to talk about the project and start recording. And actually, Hell on Earth was like my first CD that I ever owned. So meeting Havoc and actually working on the product with him was super exciting.
That's awesome. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you as well, Robert.
Yeah, I think very, very similar story to Cons. I think what has been usually the most memorable moments over the past 15 years were always like the interaction points that you had with your users, and also being like an avid music fan of various genres. Like I also remember those moments when you basically meet one of your idols and suddenly he turns just into a customer of yours and wants something from you rather than you from him. And I actually remember that I think must have been a year of me working here. I actually came in through the sound design side of the business, and we had Timbaland in town, who was back then like on his peak with Justin Timberlake and was that era, and was basically coming in here into our Berlin backyard with his big Bentley and entourage, and I got the chance to walk him through our product catalog, and like everybody was just super excited and very, very quiet, and I walked them like over 2 hours like through every single sound that we had available back then. And I had many of these moments over the years, and always stuck to me because you could see that even if you have those big producers from Timbaland to Hans Zimmer, at the end of the day, there's always a nerdy personality and somebody who's just trying to push the boundaries in regards to sound behind that personality. And that gets you really excited to see how aligned you are actually behind the scenes around the things that really make you passionate.
Oh, I love that story. I appreciate that because, I mean, that's sort of what we're getting to, right? There's this sort of almost like invisible divide between the recording side of the music industry and the creation and the production side. And you guys are actually even further up with making the instruments and the sounds that even go before that. And I love to see it as this seamless thread through. And I think the spirit and the culture of Native Instruments is such that I think you guys feel connected through all of it. But those points of contact are really great for us in music tectonics as we're continuing to kind of see those lines blur and more relationships, partnerships, innovations that are emerging that kind of tie it all together. So let's fast forward. How has the past year been for Native Instruments, for the community of artists, producers, and sound designers?
Yeah, it's definitely been an exceptional year, I think, for everyone in the world, and we are no different there. I think when it comes to the music industry, I think you have two sides. I think you have a lot of people struggling because the live industry went almost completely away. It's now reopening. I think we're all jealously looking at the US where you have some shows already, and I think Coachella was just announced that it's coming back next year. I think for us, it showed us, I think the resilience of our team and how we can work together and deliver great products to artists during that time. That was great to see throughout the last year where we went fully remote as a company. That has its own challenges of running a business fully remote, but it showed us that we have an amazing team that can really deliver and innovate even on hours-long Zoom and Google Hangout calls. And at the same time, we saw a lot of people that rediscovered their love for music creation. So at the beginning, when nobody kind of knew what was going to happen, so around, I want to say, March, April, I think every company in the world was being very careful, basically decrease risk, stop spending, and said, okay, let's really see what happens here. And like you probably know already, a lot of companies in our space saw a big rise in user engagement, first of all. So a lot of people dusting off their complete controller keyboards and their machinists and saying, well, I've got some time now and I want to find something meaningful to do with that time. So I'm going to re-engage in my hobby of making music, or maybe I even see it as an opportunity to create something that is aside from what I'm doing in my day job, and maybe refocus on this as a profession. And I think as a third aspect, we also saw a ton of new customers and new users that came in through the doors at Native Instruments, just wanting to, download a free product, get into it, get inspired. So that's been amazingly exciting for us to see this influx of new creators come in that also have, different requirements, different needs, that tell us different things of what they are looking for. So that's been the last year for us, at least around, the time when things really started to change.
I think what's also been incredible for us lately is to see that even though the world is opening up again and attention is spent elsewhere, that we still see a super high engagement in regards to our product. So it feels like in many other industries that through the pandemic, like the digital side of our world has gained a lot more attention, and a lot more people who will most likely, and that's what we also hope, stay around with us. And in a way, it just basically leapfrogged us a lot closer to where we end up. And core of our mission is still to democratize our space, make the tools and the products and the sounds more available to everyone. And as Con just said, we saw this huge influx of old but also new users that are still sticking around even till summer, you could say, and keep on creating music.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we're definitely hearing from other places this growth of music making and this kind of new energy of creativity and being more prolific in terms of writing and putting out music. Are there other ways that the pandemic has influenced music making? Are there different approaches that's happening? And then how is that influencing you as a company?
I think good question. What we also observe is that all the adjacent, like maybe more rising industries got a huge boost. So we see that there's a lot going on in the community, for example. So basically, people use new platforms, for example, to share their ideas, but also basically to teach others. Like, I think, for example, a platform like Twitch has gained a lot more relevance in regards to also being leveraged by people to educate others. And in general, also all the aspects of digital collaboration, or basically all things that basically enable you to collaborate even though you're not in the same room, have also gained a massive boost through technology. So I think today it's increasingly easier to also collaborate, even though if you're not sitting in the same room, if you want to make music, because of a lot of startups, a lot of companies that are focused around that space.
I think what it has shown to us, maybe for the second part of your question, is that as we see so many more people come into the funnel and wanting to start creating, and they use whatever's out there. We have a free bundle that's the complete with a K start, right? Which is a free product that has about, I think, 7 or 8 different instruments in it that we introduced in, I think, 2019, and it was always a great way to give something free to the community so people can get started. But we saw a massive uptake in downloads of that bundle during that time. I think what has changed for us is not leave users by themselves once they have downloaded that bundle, but really help them. And I think it's as much about collaboration as it is about learning and education, because every person that gets into this is doing it for, is it for the love of making music? Is it for pursuing a career? Because the ways of publishing and funding yourself have changed so dramatically and have also become so much easier. Right? There's so many great stories of independent creators that are successful. But there is still, I think, a gap of, getting into it and getting software or a hardware product and actually learning how to use it. And I think a lot of our focus is thinking about how can we help more users be more successful, because they will ultimately also be longer term customers for us if they can be successful in making music. So this focus of supporting the community and really helping people to get better at music making, those are two kind of main pillars that have strengthened for us over the past year.
Awesome. Makes a ton of sense. I mean, especially as people are working in isolated ways, they can't get together with friends and collaborators in person as much. And so relying on you and the online forums and conversations and education materials and so forth makes a ton of sense. I'm wondering if you could think of any specific examples of native instrument artists and producers who maybe did something different, unique, something that caught your eye in the past year. Maybe it's a result of social distancing or lockdowns or these types of online interactions, maybe remote collaborations that maybe have become stronger as a result of this forced isolation and this forced way of being in the world. Does anyone come to mind?
Maybe since Robert mentioned Timbaland, I think he was very much the Renaissance man of music production, and all great things to him. I think he's doing an amazing job. I think one of the things that became clear early on in the pandemic is that there needs to be a different avenue for producers to showcase their music, their beats, and what they're doing. And I think Timbaland and Swiss Beats really capitalized on that really well with Versus very early on. I remember watching the first one just in LA. I think it was Hit Boy, and I forget who the other one was, actually, the other producer at the time. But they obviously turned it into this massive cultural phenomenon that really at the beginning highlighted producer culture. And I think that's something that we've seen kind of time and time again, that if we do something, we, for example, last summer did a free sound pack called Community Drive, where we invited many well-known producers and artists to contribute sounds and presets, from Sia to Take a Day Trip guys that do Lil Nas X to produce sounds for this pack. And we gave it away for free to the community, and then hosted a competition around it. And that's been super successful in terms of engaging our community, as well as providing something to give back, because we also raised some money there that we gave to various charities. So I think any models that could really capture this kind of vacuum of like, we can't meet in person, like how can we still showcase what we're doing and get better at it? That was, I think those were some of the winning concepts, I think, at the time.
Maybe one other thing to call out is also that I think many producers have developed maybe a bit more of a back to basics mindset, because you just tend to make music a lot more from home in a pandemic instead of going to a big studio, and you basically try to work with the tools that are around you in your bedroom or your living room and wherever. And I think it also feeds directly in this macro trend that we just see in the whole space, that the independent creator, like somebody who basically creates music relatively by himself and who's also then able to publish, distribute, and market it by himself, has probably seen a huge rise. And we also know this from the numbers, like more downstream from where we are sitting in our industry, that it's just like the independent creator has been a huge success story. I think spearheaded by people like Phineas, for example, that basically paved the way, I think, for many people to gain the confidence that you don't need a mega studio to make it to the top. And that has actually also really inspired us.
Yeah, we have this we talk about it with the team more than externally, but we always marvel at the Billboard Top 100s, and we look at the kind of individual tracks and kind of less scientific, but more by relationship, the producers behind those tracks. And I think we have gained market share, if you will, in terms of native instruments products being used on those tracks, not because our products are so great, maybe a little bit that, but because more and more people are entering the Billboard Top 100s that previously were needing a large studio, a major label, but this is a producer sitting somewhere on a laptop using some software and making hits for the masses. And that's definitely changed, right? And that trend is also benefiting us and making us think a bit differently about how we approach our business.
Oh, I'm super interested in the fact that you guys are keeping an eye on the record industry and thinking about how that influences what you do. In fact, I want to get into that in just a minute, but first we have to take a quick break for an announcement. But when we get back, I'll ask you more about that. Does your company belong at the center of the conversation about music tech innovation? Listen, you should consider sponsoring the Music Tectonics Conference. The top tier sponsorships are selling fast, but we still have some slots for you, whether your business is a hungry startup or an industry leader already. Get sponsor benefits at our online events October 25th through October 27th, and in-person events outdoors by the sea in Los Angeles on November 2nd. It's going to be awesome. At every sponsorship level, you'll get a virtual exhibitor booth in the metaverse. If you've been disappointed by digital brand pages at other online events, you're going to love running a virtual booth at Music Tectonics. Trust me, we've tested it out. We've had events here, and it's a blast. We're offering the experience of a high-tech in-person expo booth at a fraction of the cost and none of the heavy lifting. Feature your videos, slide decks, graphics, and special offers so your company is top of mind with potential partners, investors, and clients. But best of all, you'll be able to draw a virtual crowd as attendees move through a three-dimensional virtual space. They can see where the action is, strike up conversations no matter where you are on the planet, and no VR headset is required. That's just one perk of being a sponsor at Music Tectonics. You could be a guest on this podcast, play a role in conference programming, and attend our VIP-only meetup in LA. Interested? Let's talk. Go to musictectonics.com/sponsors. That's musictectonics.com/sponsors to find out who's already signed on and start the conversation. Okay, we are back with Constantin and Robert from Native Instruments. And I know that you guys have tapped into some of the music tectonics conversations about the shifts I mentioned at the top of the episode, these new forces that are pushing the musical instrument world together closer with the traditional record industry. I'm curious where, and we started to talk about that a little bit before the break. Where do you see things going in the next 2 or 3 years as it relates to that interesting convergence?
I can start. It's obviously something that we think about a lot, and I think we look at it a little bit from the context of history. I think Native Instruments started, a long time ago. We're not a startup anymore. We've been around for 25 years. I think we said initially and shared that already. And we started at a time at the late 90s where making music was still a very expensive endeavor, and you needed to know a lot. So probably needed to have gone to kind of engineering school and buy an expensive, hardware, a synthesizer, or invest into a studio that might set you back, tens of thousands of dollars. And I think what our achievement has been over the last 25 years, one of them is to really widen that access by bringing down the price and also simplifying the user experience of making music. At the same time, I think we are both inspired and believe that there's a lot more to do when it comes to reducing complexity and just simplifying the way of making music, because let's face it, the requirements for an artist or producer have changed massively. It's not just about making music anymore. It is about making a name for yourself, running your social media, creating a brand for yourself, collaborating with others, networking, creating an image for yourself as much as it is about creating a sound. So I think it's also the job of companies like us to help get to better results more quickly in terms of the software and the tools that people are using, and help people educate them and help them to do that. And you can think a lot about the different services today that artists have that are pretty fragmented, I would say. So somebody finishes something with Native Instruments, then they go on to master that track, then they go on to publish it, they find ways to market it, and that journey is still pretty fragmented. So I think we'll see a lot more convergence of that space coming together to make for a more, I would say, seamless experience from somebody's first idea into getting a track published on Spotify.
Yeah, and I think just to add here, like Juan said, I think the past 2 decades were probably marked by companies like Native Instruments and others to basically make all the tools and means available to producers that you could ever wish for. And I think we are convinced that the next decade will be defined by also making this super accessible, because right now the market is still extremely fragmented. As a producer, you have at least to spend as much time setting things up, figuring things out that you can use to actually compose things and be in the creative moment. And we actually, as a company, and I think also the whole space, want to change that ratio, right? So we want to enable producers to basically spend the majority of their time more in the creative flow, and have them spend as little time as possible in the administrative part of the process. And if you then zoom out, the same is true for the macro view of our space. It's still a pretty long and winding road to basically get from Ableton or Avid or whatever DAW you're using to make it to Spotify. And I think that road will be consolidated more and will become much more seamless and less windy over the next 5 to 10 years.
I think at the same time, I think at the end of that road, there's a lot more paths for creators, which I think is exciting. It's not just Spotify or streaming service. There's ways to make music for gaming, for podcasts, to just find really new ways. I mean, I don't want to mention NFTs here, as I'm sure you have.
You just did
have them a lot on your podcast. But there's so many more ways for people to find success in their own creation. And I think one additional aspect that is really important to us is it's not just access for access sake or to kind of widen the business. It's today music making, I would say, is a very mono dimensional enterprise still in the music production world. So it's still a majority male customer base that a lot of companies like Native Instruments and Ableton and others still have. And I think there's many things you can do to change that. And the same goes for where music making happens today, which is still very much a Western focus, I would say, in the music technology space that we are in. Whereas we know music is super global, it's never been more global. So I think there's also a ton of opportunity to provide more access through localization of our products and other things that we can do to provide more access to more people ultimately, and also through that diversify the audience.
So I'm seeing a day when the Machine Plus has a new toggle on it that switches from music making to all the administrative stuff, Robert, you were talking about, and all of a sudden the different colorful buttons, this one says push to Spotify, push to Apple Music, go to Tidal, do high res, do spatial audio, all those things. And then Con, regarding your global framework there, and then you can pick territories too. Do you want it to distribute this territory or split rights? So you're literally on the hardware and just picking. You can assign which color you want for which streaming service, which marketing tool, all that kind of stuff. I see some head nodding going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways we see it as to the global point. I think as a responsibility for a company like us to also help diversify the end output, if you will, right? Because we are, as you said initially, quoting Mark's report, very much the top of the funnel for creators. So I think whatever comes in at the top of the funnel also comes out somewhere, and I think helping people along that journey, and then maybe there is a way to get directly to distribution. I think. Interestingly enough, I think we previously had this in I think iMachine, one of our iOS products, where you could publish directly to SoundCloud, for example. So it was a pretty active kind of iOS music making group on SoundCloud that was comparing 16-bar loops and getting excited about that, which I still sometimes check into. But I think there is obviously a gap to be closed between your music making process and what you want to ultimately do with it.
So is that something we can see in the future for Native Instruments? I'm sure you don't want to release too many specific details before anything's ready, but that's a direction that sounds like it could actually influence the company activities.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't go so far to promise you the distribute on Spotify button on Machine, but I think really whatever makes accessibility around our ecosystem better, I think is definitely getting a lot of attention from us these days.
Yeah, cool. So what about this joint venture you announced with Izotope this year? How did that come together, and what's it going to mean for you? It's kind of like, from the outside, it's sort of like, wait, what does this mean? It's a joint venture. It's not a merger. It's not a acquisition. It's a joint venture. We don't see a lot of this announced in a way that seems kind of significant. What does this mean?
Yeah, I think definitely special, right? I think from many perspectives, I think Izotope is very much like the sister in mind for many people at Native Instruments, and vice versa. I think somebody in the whole process called it a marriage made in heaven, which I think many people in both companies and many of our customers can subscribe to. I think this whole process started with us also thinking around how can we defragment the experience, right? I think that was one important aspect to what we just talked about before. Why do you have to go somewhere else to do a step in your creative process that you might want to do out of one kind of cohesive experience? And when we then kind of look around the market and who is the kind of gold standard in effects, especially when it comes to mixing, mastering, repair, Izotope is a company we've admired for many, many years. So pairing up and getting together under the same kind of hood with the help of also our shareholders at Native Instruments here was an exciting proposition that we all couldn't resist, I think, on both sides. And now it's about really leveraging that partnership and getting our people and our talents together to leverage the amazing technologies we have on the Native side and the ISO side, and ultimately get to a simplified experience around music making that probably starts more with the sound generation and instrument at Native Instruments, but ends up with mastering your track in Ozone before you have that published to wherever button come in after. So that's maybe explains it a bit. I don't know if it fully answers your question, Dmitri.
Well, I think what you're saying is it's the first step in building this bridge into this less fragmented experience. It's to go from the sound all the way to the mastering level and everything in between. Is that right?
Exactly. I think if you basically look at the workflow of most of Native Instruments users, And most of the Izotope user base, you will basically see that's exactly the same people, just using the tools of both companies at a different stage in the process. And there is still a lot of potential to basically also connect those stages in the process a lot more. And this is ultimately where we see also the potential between native and ISO joining forces to basically defragment the production process and the workflow first, but also leverage the amazing technology that both companies have built up over the years to basically apply them on the other side. ISO, for example, has some amazing machine learning technology, but leveraged it mostly currently in the effect space. And if you imagine what that could do applied to the instruments ecosystem of native instruments, you basically get to a lot of really interesting ideas that we are hoping to see over the course of the next few years.
Awesome. Okay. Well, good to have some insights there. Separate or part of that, doesn't matter. I'm just curious, can we ask you what new product directions we can hope to see in the coming months and years? I mean, this sounds like an integration opportunity, but be curious to hear what else is coming down the pike.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is for sure, you can definitely expect more instruments and more sounds, and we are not giving that up anytime soon. And we very much still believe also in the power of the ecosystem that we've built and the flywheel between our hardware, our software, our platforms. So this is something that's at the core of the native business. And Izotope just has awesome opportunities to also integrate into that ecosystem and into that flow. So we'll definitely make sure that we power that ecosystem and the connections between hardware, software, even more than we did in the past. And then, as we've mentioned before, I think access as a theme to basically our ecosystem from a pricing, usability, but also from a cultural perspective is one of the main points of our mission going forward, to basically make what we do not just available to our current customers, but to a lot more people.
I would maybe just add maybe one aspect or one facet of that I think fits into that, but might be especially interesting kind of to the listeners of this podcast and kind of the audience, because we talk a lot about the conversions between kind of the music industry and the record industry, if we want to call it that, and the kind of music making and music tech space that we are in. And I think we've always believed that there's also an important bridge to cross just in terms of products, right? Because if you're getting started in music production, you most likely will have an idol that you want to sound like. I think if you pick up a guitar, you want to sound like, I don't know, Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton. The same is true for a hip hop producer that wants to sound like Sunny Digital or 40 or whoever else. We've done some amazing creator partnerships in the past with artists and producers, and it's definitely something that we see a lot more opportunity in because it's a great way to give back to the community and really invest into producers, and at the same time offer a lot more people access to instruments and sounds from the people that they admire. We need to close that loop and that circle.
Awesome. All right, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, I want to ask you a little bit about your personal journeys. We started off talking a little bit about stories from your own musical meetings of idols and how that's collided. But I want to talk a little bit about your roles as well. So we'll ask you that when we come right back. Whoa, the ideas are flying fast on this episode. If you want to follow up on anything we're talking about today, we've made it easy. Head over to musictectonics.com and find this episode on the podcast page. You'll see show notes full of links and a time-stamped roadmap of the conversation. We're not responsible for internet rabbit holes you tumble down in the process. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Okay, we are back. And Constantin, as I said before the break, I wanted to ask you a little bit about each of your own journeys. As a PR guy myself, I'm intrigued that you worked your way up from the marketing side to become CEO. I'm curious, what have been some of the biggest lessons you learned from coming in from the marketing side of the business?
Yeah, I'm the hope for all PR people in music tech. You can make it. Look, I think it's ultimately the passion that comes with the space that's always kept me really curious and wanting to learn and grow. That's really, I think, if I had to break it down to one thing, I think that's really what it is. Because with that comes, the interest in wanting to learn new things and wanting to surround yourself with people like my very cherished colleague Robert here to really better understand and learn about, how our contact platform is powering many parts of our industry, and so on. And I think it also gives you the drive and the attitude to basically put in the work that you also need to put into. I think build up the resilience to do this. I think a lot of what PR is and marketing is about storytelling, and that's very much also the job of a CEO of a company like Native Instruments, because it's about taking people on a journey and really investing into the culture of the company, because many people here are super talented and could be working for the large tech companies in the world, which I maybe shouldn't say. They have more ideas to do this, but they are driven here by a passion to work on the things that really matter to them, which is to build amazing products and services for music producers. And I can really authentically tell that story because it's also my story at Native Instruments. Yeah, that's what I would maybe say to that question.
Yeah, no, I love that. Do you think that there's things that you think of differently because you come from that marketing background than somebody that came purely from a product or a technical background?
Yeah. I mean, I think Native Instruments has always been a company that's been very much driven by marketing and product, I would say. That's always been also the leadership of Daniel Mate that ran this company for a long period of time, and that really built up this amazing thing over here that we have the privilege to really take into the future. And I think because of that, marketing has always played an important role at Native Instruments. I think, there's one way to talk about technology and products, which can be very technical and can be very nerdy, or you can talk about the benefits and the opportunities and the inspiration that comes with the tools that you have in your hand. And that's why I think also here is talking a lot about helping users and the community versus just dropping the technology on people's laptops. And I think that's maybe a major difference in terms of how you talk about it and how you communicate it and what you emphasize in your organization and also to the market.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I want to flip it over to you, Robert. You've been on the product and sound design side from the beginning, I think like 15 years, maybe. And so I'm curious, how has it been to go from a technical role into executive leadership? What have been your favorite learnings along the way?
Yeah, really good question. I think it's almost now 16 years, I have to admit. So
Congrats.
It seems like a lifetime, or half of it at least. And yeah, like you said, like I came in through sound and product design and basically got the privilege to spend my first years with also some of the really inventive and smart people that helped to make Native Instruments big, like Stefan Schmidt, who basically founded the company, who is behind Reactor, Mike Dalliot, who's basically the master behind Massive and a lot of the synthesizers that Native built over the years. And I think those people basically created like also this ambition in myself that by just putting in the right amount of work and passion and like surrounding yourself like with the right team, that you're not just able to change the, I would say, destiny of Native Instruments. You're really able to make your mark in music culture, which is something that I think motivates the two of us. That at one point, Native could really claim that whole subgenres wouldn't have had been possible without the tools that Native gave to producers. And that's a really great thought looking back, that you basically were able to be a part of something very, very long lasting and dear to your heart, like the evolution of music. And I would say that ambition hasn't left me like also in an executive role. You obviously have to live with a lot more abstraction towards the things, and you shouldn't interfere with the people that have the really good ideas too much anymore, but focus much more on setting the right goals and paving a direction and path and enabling the people rather than doing stuff yourself. Although I have to admit, I'm very, very tempted to still like get my hands dirty and just try some sound design here and there with some of the tools that we still have around. So I never fully gave up what basically motivated me so much in the first years. But yeah, it's a little bit also like concept. You basically have to get used to become much more of a storyteller and somebody who's able to sketch out a vision, and then more importantly also to enable a path to execute against that vision and mission, and basically let the smart people do what they can do best while you are basically creating the freedom and unblock them as good as you can.
Wow, it's really interesting to hear you both answer those questions from those two different but overlapping perspectives because, I really hear from you, Robert, that you're talking about you can really see the legacy of the impact of the product from not just the technical side, but the user side as well, that interaction with the product and see the story emerge from that side as well, which is super interesting, which is very similar to what you said as well, but certainly, thinking storytelling first. So it's almost like you guys are inverses of the same coin. A good partnership, I would say.
Yeah, it's been a pretty amazing year for us, to be honest. We're coming kind of to the end of the first year of our leadership, and I think Native Instruments has always been run by two people. That's been the kind of history. So I think we're continuing that tradition, and I think it's really important that you have a very open and direct relationship with your business partner, and we certainly have that. But we also have the benefit of having grown up in the company and overlapping in a lot of our motivations and our passions and our ultimate goals of where we want to take the company.
Awesome. Great. Well, I appreciate you guys going down memory lane as it goes in terms of your roles there. I want to broaden it out before we wrap up our episode today. I'm always curious about what music trends or emerging, like music tech trends or emerging influences that our guests are keeping an eye on. I don't know if one of you wants to go first and let's go big picture. What is the stuff that we haven't talked about yet that you guys are like, this is kind of interesting?
I can maybe start it, and Con then has the last word on that prediction. I think we mentioned it here and there already. We believe there's going to be a huge potential in the industry still to make it to open up more, like to basically go from a very male, very uniform type of user base to basically enable everybody who's really interested in music, and that's so many more people than are enabled today to create music on a computer. So I think that's going to be a huge macro trend that we are going to see. I think we are definitely, like so many other digital businesses, will experience a pure power of machine learning and then AI in general also moving into our space and helping people to basically get into the creative flow and realize their idea much quicker than they had been before. And I think then also on a macro level, we'll also see like this process that we called out before, from basically Pro Tools or Live to Spotify, becoming a lot more seamless, potentially adding new players to that journey, but maybe also getting rid of some established players that the dependencies are really large towards still today.
I subscribe to all of that. What Robert has shared. I think another maybe even kind of broader prediction would be that the kids that are getting into music production today will use different tools in the future. And I think it's up to companies like Native Instruments to listen to those customers and work with them to develop what the next generation of tools looks like. I mean, if we look at the last 10 to 15 years, it's mostly been kind of laptop-paced music production. We know that mobile doesn't play a huge role in our space yet, which is kind of counterintuitive. But sometimes you find in music technology and music production, people are quite traditionalists in terms of how they are creating. So I think we'll see a much larger platform shift happening over the next years, especially as more and more people are getting into music production. And we see this big wave of creators that are realizing, wow, I can actually make money with this. This is a career I can take. I'm 20 years old. I'm debating if I should go to college, which is kind of half Zoom classes these days anyway, or if I should make some beats and publish them online. And I think those are some of the choices that people are making today. So we want to be there and support those creators on their way also over the next 15 years or 25 years rather.
Awesome. Well, this has been an absolute blast. I really appreciate you guys taking time. It's an honor to continue to envelop you guys into the music tectonics community. We've had you folks on your team do demos of instruments at some of our events, and we're going to keep encircling you guys, welcoming you into music tectonics, and have you do more and more. You've been listening to me, Dmitri Vietze, with Rock, Paper, Scissors. I've been interviewing Native Instruments CEO Constantin Koehncke and President and Chief Product Officer Robert Linke. It's been such a pleasure to have you. Thanks for being on the show, guys.
Thanks so much, Dmitri. We really appreciate it. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We put out new episodes every week. Want more? Find it at musictectonics.com. You can dig deeper into this episode, learn about our annual conference, get the Music Tectonics app, and sign up for our newsletter. musictectonics.com has it all. Also, look for Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Clubhouse. And connect with me, Dmitri Vietze, on LinkedIn. Peace.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.